life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Bern, you know, we've been getting a lot of letters from people lately complaining and mentioning how they struggle with their lives. They feel trapped in a dead-end job, getting up every morning at 6 o'clock, dropping the kids off at the sitter, fighting that rush hour traffic, sitting at a desk all day long, coming home at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, exhausted, and starts all over again tomorrow. And you know, they see the same snack lady every day at break and buy the same snacks, and they're frustrated. Am I going to do this for 30 years of my life is the question. I'm not happy with my kids going to daycare every day. I want to be with them. I want to have something creative that I'm proud to be a part of, that I'm making a contribution to society, that when I come to retire and even then when I die, I will have lived my life with purpose and value and some gratification. But here I am trapped. What do I do about it?
Of course, a lot of people don't think in the terms that you just spoke. They just stop it. I'm trapped.
Yeah.
You know, you think in terms of purpose and dedication and commitment and fulfillment. See, that's part of your thinking. And I see this all the time. And perhaps you've remembered my saying in the past, and I will again and again, that this is not the land of the free and home of the brave. You know what I mean? We sing the songs, I mean, it sounds great, but it's not necessarily true. I do think it's a land for the free and a home for the brave. And what I mean is there has to be a transition from where we are to what we were intended to be.
So in other
capacity
words,
for. Yeah.
Not many of us are free and brave.
That's right.
I would have to agree with that. I think most of us are trapped and afraid by our circumstances in our lives. Here I am. If I don't keep going to this job, I'm not going to have any money to pay the rent, take care of my family. Or if I don't do this, my partner's going to totally flip their lid and my relationship will end. Or if I don't do this, if I don't do that, I have no control over my life.
I think the person who is frustrated perhaps is on the verge of a breakthrough if they will pursue the frustration. I think it's just as challenging with people who aren't, that are just content the way things are, who have lost their curiosity, who have lost their sense of things could be better and different, even frustrated that they're not. You know what I mean? In other words, if a person begins to get, you know, fervent about the fact that I don't like this, I don't want this, maybe curiosity is beginning to seep into their system again, and they'll start looking around and seeing really what's available out here.
So you're saying that uncomfortable position is actually a good place to be?
I think so, because at least you're thinking. It's kind of like celebrating your ignorance. So every day when I get up in the morning, I go, wow, am I ignorant? Because I realize how much I don't know, how much I will never know. I recognize, too, that the intellects that I listen to are ignorant people. I mean, they don't know it all either. They may have a compartment in their life that they're specialized in, but there's so many other things. And so when you know you're ignorant, at least then your curiosity is stimulated. It's kind of like the feeling when you walk into a bookstore. I mean, it's just awesome. All this stuff I will never really know about. No matter how hard I try, there's going to be something else I don't understand. And curiosity is healthy. Incuriosity, or a sense of contentment. For example, over the years we've done, I mean, literally thousands of interviews with people. And we have a thing called a socioeconomic review. And on there's a place where a person can put the dot as to where they are economically, you know, in the past 12 months. And most people, we ask, well, if we could put you in command of the dot, and you could do anything you wanted with it, would you let it slide down the scale, or would you leave it alone, or would you move it up the line? You know, accomplish more, have more, do more. You'd be surprised how many people say, well, I'll just leave it alone.
They're content where they are.
I mean, they say, this is it. This is all that I'm going to have, so I'm not even going to think about it. And some of that comes from admonitions maybe from their parents years ago, and be content with what you have, and it's evil to want. I mean, all this kind of stuff gets in there.
Do you think generally they're resigned to their fate?
Oh, I think so.
And that it hurts too much to want more? Or do you think they basically just don't want the pressure or the challenge of it, and they'd rather have a little less
Both
burden?
resign. People refuse promotions, so I couldn't handle that. Too much responsibility? Not at all. You know, they have the capacity for it. Or they just stop thinking. I've known people who really didn't want to go shopping for fear they may be stimulated to want something they know they can't have. I mean, that's just shutting down. You know what I mean? In other words, it's kind of the end. And what we're saying is that, and those people who do want to move the dot, the people who say, well, yeah, I want more, and I'll take it all, you know. And we say, okay, how do you do that? I mean, how do you move the dot? You tell us what the rules are, what the things you're supposed to do. And, we'll hear some answers, you know, they're standard stock answers, like work harder and have a plan. And
go back to
set
school.
goals and go back to school and save you money, make good investments, you know, but there's no concrete answers there. And so later when we say, I appreciate your answers, but I did sense some vagueness here, and they will say, yeah, because if they knew how to move the dot, they'd be moving it. You know what I mean? And the only way to find out maybe how to move the dot, socioeconomically, even theologically, it doesn't matter, is to be curious, to go out and to read and to study, to listen, to think, to expose yourself to new ideas. Doesn't mean you have to accept them, but to keep exposing, to keep examining, to keep testing, to keep challenging. And sooner or later, you're going to find perhaps a way of recapturing your authority so that you can move out and do what you have the capacity for. Now, you may not have the ability for, but boy, if people would just start, you know, not only selling their ignorance, which is a recognition of their capacity. See, if you're ignorant, that means what?
You
there's
have more room to go.
There's
Yeah.
room for more, and so get excited about that and say, okay, now I'll grant you that sometimes we can read a book and it's not very edifying. Or we can go to a seminar and it's just like the one that we've heard before. But that's no reason not to go to another and to read another book and to maybe kind of look around and ask questions and say, have you had any experiences lately that were really forward moving? But to be excited about filling the container, you know, completing the vacuum, if you would. Because I'll tell you, I see it all the time. Now, the battle, of course, is the fact that we have a very powerful subconscious mind that's perfectly content just the way things are. And if we're not thinking, it'll win.
That brings up a really interesting point. I was at a training seminar last weekend, and one of the speakers mentioned that he often speaks for multi-level marketing kinds of companies, and he was asked by some heads of that organization to help them research why it was they had so many people in their organization that were highly motivated, extremely positive and energetic, knew their product very well, knew exactly what to do to go through the process of being successful in that organization, but produced hardly anything. And they said, why is that? They're excited, they're motivated, they know what to do, but they're not producing anything. What is the problem here? And they did a survey of like 3,000 people, and the answer they came up with was the people didn't have enough belief in themselves and their ability to actually succeed. And I wonder how much of that occurs in our society, as you were mentioning earlier. We're told by our parents or by our teachers or other people in our lives, well, don't expect it, it won't happen to you, or certain professions like the performing arts, etc. Well, only the very few make that, and it's all luck or who you sleep with and things like that. So people are starting out already with a cap on their ability to perform. That's not even in their control. It's determined by exterior factors. So they have no faith.
Well, they've relinquished their influence over that. In other words, I think most of us, well, I know that most people, what I see out there, and this is what we focus on all the time, is how to get that mass to move forward, at least percentage-wise, you know, to get some of them. Because if, for example, in an organization, if you were getting like 80% of your business out of 20% of the people, if we could make that 80 out of 40%, you know what I mean? My gosh, you double your business. I mean, and you can't get them all because some people are so deeply entrenched in their pain and their hurt, they won't listen to anybody. In fact, you tell them something and they'll say, oh yeah, I've heard that before, you know what I mean, because they just heard it. You know, they won't take it as new information, only as, you know, as a passive thing. But the thing of it is, a lot of it, I feel this, that people's authority, and their esteem has been diminished, and their initiative has been trained right out of them. See, in this multi-level thing you were talking about, no one's going to come to these people and say, hey, I understand you're multi-level, I want to get involved. It's not going to happen. And yet most of the rest of their life has worked that way. I mean, started way back when Mama told them what to wear and when to eat and when to go to bed. You know what I mean? We're so subject to accommodating, and I know I'm subject to it. I had an experience some years ago. I wasn't even conscious of this until, I guess it had to have been probably 1951, maybe 52. I was in the Navy at the time, and I was in a pinochle game. I remember this just like yesterday. And I was a pretty good pinochle player. And there was a guy in the barracks, though. His name was Ionetta. You know, we called him Dago, and back then that was okay. Right? Dago Ionetta. And he was on the boxing team, and he was a pretty bright guy. But he loved to gamble and play cards, and he was good. He was good at pinochle. Anyway, I was playing the game one day, and the hand had been dealt out, and I had fanned out my cards, and I was preparing for my bid, and I made the bid, and all that was taken care of. Then we started to play. Well, right at that point, Ionetta came into the room and happened to settle right by my right shoulder. Hadn't seen the rest of the hands or anything. My turn came around. I reached for a card that I was going to play, and it was an appropriate card, but I felt this nudge on my shoulder, you know, and I went, and he went, and I went, oh, and he nodded on that one, so I played that card, and it worked out. So came around again, I reached for a card, and I felt this nudge, you know, and I looked up, and I had already selected a card, and he encouraged me not to do that, and I moved my hand, found the one, and I played that. Third time around, you know what I mean? I waited for him to, you know what I mean? I had already surrendered
your authority and your ability to play cards.
I thought, what is this about, you know? And I see that happening all the time. People just relinquishing their authority because someone is kibitzing on them. And by the way, the whole world is kibitzing on them. You know, sometimes their spouse, their kids, their boss, you know, circumstances, the bill collector or the mortgage holder. Everybody is saying, hey, I want this part of you. And in order to accommodate, boy, we can really lose it. And so, and I know in driving a car, if I get a side seat driver, I had a little difficulty with one here recently, but I think I got it worked out. But anyway, if I get a side seat driver who says turn right and there's a stoplight and look out for that stop sign and here's a bus coming, after a while I find myself just kind of waiting for instructions. And I'd drive right up a tree if they didn't say, hey, there's a tree. You know what I mean? It's so easy to do that if you're not conscious. Now, once you get conscious that's happening, then if you're aware, you can start saying, wait a minute, you know, I need to be in command of this. See, here's the thing. What we teach and what we've been promulgating now for numbers of years and having this show for the last 2 years, and hopefully we'll be continuing, is that we, you and I, and everyone listening, watching, is in command of the direction their life is taking. Not in control. That's a misnomer. That doesn't work. You're not in control of anything. But you sure are in command of the direction your life is taking. So whether you understand that or not, that makes a difference. A lot of people don't understand that. So if they don't understand it, how can they exercise it? Or it's whether they act on it or not that's going to make the difference. Even if you understand it, you may not act on it.
I think that's a really scary thing to do, because if you start taking responsibility for your life, then if anything goes wrong, you're at fault instead of being able to blame someone else or your circumstances. And I don't know why that is. Because if anything goes right, well, then you can take credit for that as well.
Yeah. See, we're the center of we're naturally subjective. Again, this is the trick of the mind. We are naturally subjective people. In other words, which means that whether we admit it or not, we feel kind of like we're the center of the universe. And that's normal. That's a fairly normal state. It can be certified, too. Did I ever tell you about walking along a beach one night? Oh, it's fascinating. Now, I know I'm not the center of the universe. I am the center of my universe, and that's okay. But to be the center of the universe is a pretty subjective, tentative place to be. But I can see how it can happen, because I remember one night in Cancun, some time ago, I went out for a late night moonwalk, and I was by myself. And I was walking along the beach, and I'm talking maybe 2 or 3 miles here. And no matter where I was, the moonbeam that came from the moon that covers the, comes across the ocean
Was
onto the
right
beach.
there with you,
was
huh?
right there with me everywhere I went. And as the waves came up on the shore, it seemed like one would come especially far just to lick at my toes and then go away. I mean, it's all kinds of certification that, this is fascinating. It's called subjectivity. It's a natural state, and we have to break through it with understanding and recognize that we're supranatural beings. See, we're above this, we're beyond this, we're outside of this subjectivity, but it's so hard to get there. And the world at large, and I would say probably, 97% of the people that exist in it are subjective by nature. And boy, I'll tell you, it's a wonder we do as well as we do. We can be objective, but in order to do that, you've got to become conscious. Now, you've got to accept your conscious mind and use it predeterminedly, moment to moment, throughout a day, and this kind of thing.
Vern, when you say become conscious, what does that mean? I mean, as opposed to being hit over the head and blacked out?
It's kind of like the only way to remain conscious is predeterminedly, because if you get up in the morning and you start doing what you do, you go into a rote state. You're doing things by rote.
Like how when you drive down the freeway and
Exactly.
you don't know how you got there, but you got there.
Exactly. Or you drive right by a turn you wanted to make this morning. If you didn't think about it consciously, you'll drive right by it because the subconscious mind says, hey, this is the direction we go.
Are there
Really
some specific exercises we can do to begin that process? And would that involve maybe like specifically sitting down and evaluating your life, writing the things that you like about your life, and maybe writing some things that you want to change in your life?
One thing a good way to start is start a journal or a diary. No question, because if you commit to making a journal or diary entry, and I guess journal might be a masculine term and diary a feminine one, I don't know, but anyway, a journal. If you're keeping a journal and you're committed to making an entry in the evening, I would think that would begin to have an effect on your day. Because if you know you're going to have to make an entry, you begin to get precognitive, you begin to create a design, a plan, an objective, if you would, so that you can write about it.
What about what about if you write in your diary in the morning before the day's happened?
You get to a point after a while where you can write your journal entry in the morning. And then you're beginning to get in command. You're beginning to exercise authority, choice, and making decisions in your favor. Now, it's easy to say and not necessarily easy to do, because if we've already negotiated chunks of our life away to other authorities, for example, if a person has a job, okay, and they're paying him a certain amount of money to be there, that unless he can find within him the courage or the skill to just walk away and do this, then he's going to probably be accommodating that portion of his life. Well, of course, now he has his family life. Well, that's all well and good, but again, if you have delegated or relegated a piece of your life, some of your authority and what have you, to your spouse, which is okay, or to your children, that's something else that you're going to have to deal with. So in order to really be free and independent and still be able to take care of all those issues is what we're talking about.
Well,
still be able to.
Part of that probably comes with an awareness that, well, maybe I do have a job that pins me down 10 to 12 hours a day, but I've consciously made the decision to stay here because what I'm getting from this job is worth the price I'm paying, as opposed to, I hate this, I don't know why I have to do this. Or, say you are responsible for a family, you consciously give up other pastimes or extra money or sleep or the things you give up because the sacrifice for those people that you're responsible for is worth it to you. You find great value in that sacrifice that you're making, and you'd gladly trade an extra game of golf for an afternoon fishing with your son or whatever it may be. But I think there are times when we forget that we consciously chose that course of action.
Maybe we didn't, though. I think that's where the frustration is. A lot of people are where they are circumstantially. Like, I remember there's some motivational speakers I remember hearing some time ago that said that you are exactly where you are because that's where you want to be. You've heard that premise, I'm sure.
Well, maybe not because that's where you want to be, but because you thought by doing what you are doing, it would get you where you wanted to be.
Yeah.
But if you have a faulty roadmap...
Well, even then maybe sometimes there's not much of that thought. In other words, a job or a circumstance is thrust at you, You don't know how to say no because you don't know what else might come up, and so you accommodate it. Years ago in 1955, I heard Earl Nightingale's recording of The Strangest Secret, and he talked in there about how a young fella gets out of the military, gets married, and goes to the girl's hometown. That's fairly typical. That's what I did. And he's kind of getting his act together and his head straight and what have you. And he's standing out on the street corner one day by the drugstore, and some local guy comes up and he says, "Hey, you know, how's it going?" He's fine. He says, "When are you going to go to work? I mean, boy, you're really taking your time here." He said, "Oh, I'm getting about ready." He said, "I'm about ready to get started." And he said, "I'll tell you what, they're hiring over at the plant. You know, why don't you come over there and get a job? I mean, we got a bowling team and a softball league. That's a fun place to work." And he said, "Well, yeah, I think I might do that." So he goes over and makes an application, and he gets hired. And that's the end of him. You know what I mean? That's what's available. He hasn't thought it through, and now it's too late. Now, and then with that money, you know, he goes out and he rents an apartment and buys a little car and a few pieces of furniture, and maybe the wife gets pregnant, and that's where he ends up. And I don't think it ever has to be that way, but it takes some real courage to begin to move away. And there's all kinds of opportunities out here where people can do that. For example, you mentioned multi-level earlier. A lot of people are going to say, "I don't want to hear about that. What's he trying to do, get me in multi-level?" Well, I'll tell you, multi-level provides a place of stimulating thought, inspiration. It may be you get into it and never make a dime. But if you begin to associate with like-minded people, you begin to dream, you begin to recognize that there can be more, that you can do more, be more, have more, and maybe some people start in the right direction that way. And now sometimes they can actually accumulate the funds and the skills that they need right there in that particular environment. But if not, they can still gain. They can still grow. But you can't do exactly the same thing you did yesterday and have any growth whatever. In other words, you have to be able to practice and to stretch, to think, to challenge yourself. And you probably, it's kind of like thinking. You know, we've talked before about how we have 50,000 thoughts a day. And if we're not careful, they're going to be the same thoughts we had yesterday, and the same thoughts we had last week and last month, and our activities are going to be the same. And so we get to be, 80, and we lay our head down and scream our way out of life saying, "This can't be over yet. I didn't do anything. I just accommodated." And boy, that's sad.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Well, just to throw a curveball at you, I kind of find it hard to imagine that anyone would be watching this show who wasn't already questioning, because I think if they're comfortable where they are and that's what they want to be, they're not going to listen to something that's going to
surf right by. Yeah.
They'd surf right by, because either it bores them or it makes them uncomfortable and they don't want to be there. So for the people who are listening who want more in their lives, maybe this sparks a little interest or a little desire to rearrange some of their thinking and try some new things. One of the first things I think that's going to happen is they're going to be beaten down by the people who are surfing past the show. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you try something new, you make other people uncomfortable. You get up a little early in the morning even to start jogging, and your partner says, "What are you doing getting up early? You're waking me up. Leave me alone. I want to sleep. Don't do that." Or, "Oh, you're going to get hit by a car if you go out early." Or all these things happen. So I think they're fighting an uphill battle. They need to recognize that, just not as to make it difficult for them, but maybe so they can be prepared for that and have some...
There's a sense of separation when you start moving forward. But usually it corrects itself. My experience is that, well, I've had experiences in the past where we recruit young people into a business and they get excited and commit themselves, and it ends up where their spouses actually leave them. You know, if you don't stop doing that, I'm leaving, and they don't know how to stop it because they feel better than they have since they were babies, you know, I mean, really growing and learning. And so the spouses leave, and then they go ahead and succeed, and the spouse returns, and then there's the banquet, you know, where they get promoted to division manager and get this big trophy, and tearfully say, "I owe this all to my spouse." You know what I mean? Yeah, it's just amazing. The separation occurs, and usually there's a rejoining later on down the line when they mature and realize that it's going to be okay. Now, sometimes, frankly, a lot of people get into illusions. They get into situations where there's a bright future, but they don't play the game today. And so the spouse is justifiably upset. You know what I mean? "Oh, sure, you're over there, but you're not functioning." You know what I mean? And so
You talk good, but your
Yeah,
your actions
yeah,
don't follow suit.
so there's this balance. You got to get real serious. You got to become accountable, not only to yourself but to tomorrow, to the money muse or the magic muse or the success muse. I mean, somebody is going to, you're going to have to account to them and say, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm prepared to do it, to get it, and we'll see what happens one step at a time. I've always found it a lot easier than we make it out to be sometimes. A lot of it is finding a purpose. Saying, what do I really want chiseled on my tombstone? I mean, what kind of mark do I want to leave on the world? Once you get a purpose, a lot of this stuff begins to pattern. It kind of begins to coincide and harmonize, and it gets easier and easier, I find. Of course, see, I try to be sympathetic, but it's hard because in 1957 I made a decision. So I was going along, and I was in the military, had been for 10 years, and I liked it. I mean, I never had an uncomfortable day in 10 years in the military.
Someone else always telling you what to do next. You didn't have to.
No, it wasn't that way for me for some
really?
reason. Yeah, they kind of left me alone, and I was in sports, and I initiated a lot of things. But I enjoyed the military. Never had a bad moment. Never had an inappropriate petty officer or, officer come down on me for anything. So it's kind of neat. And then I got into business part-time, and boy, did I fall in love with the free enterprise system.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah, I just love the whole idea. It didn't do very well, but I thought, wow, what a, work hard, get good, make a lot of money. If you don't, you don't. That seemed fair. More fair than some of this was, even though I enjoyed it. And I was moving along, and I had to make a choice. And I wanted to go out, and that choice was based on which way could I go and wonder the fewest number of times what would have happened if I'd have gone the other way. It's kind of a twisty thing, but you understand what I'm saying? I was, which way could I go and wonder the fewest number of times what could have happened if I'd have gone the other way. See, if I'd gone with the military, I pretty well had an idea of exactly what was going to happen, where I was going to be stationed, the ranks I was going to achieve, the income I was going to enjoy, you know what I mean? And if I went with the military, it was with the free enterprise system, it was going to be mystery. You know what I mean? And I couldn't avoid that choice. So I made that choice in '57, and I've never had a moment when I wasn't happy having made the choice. I mean, I never was sorry that I didn't go the other way, and it's pretty exciting. We've kind of taken up our time this evening, Gina. I appreciate your initiating this subject, but it's kind of fun. Maybe somehow you can find a way to do that for the next show. And I don't know that if we've made a point other than to get excited about your ignorance and celebrate it by being curious and examining and testing yourself. Find some people who feel the same way you do, who are acting on it, doing something, so you can harmonize in that and synergize. And then out of all of that, there'll be serendipity. Maybe we can talk about serendipity.
That would be great.
Oh, that's fun stuff, yeah. But meanwhile, I'm going to have to say, I have to assume our time is up. And I'm going to say that this is Life Talk. It's about life and living and making a living. And sometimes we throw in some loving.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to call and ask a question or get an address so they can write a letter, they can call 1-800-661-3490. The number will be repeated after the show in the credits. And meanwhile, my name is Bern, and
I'm Gina Fitt.
And my last name is
Moses.
I need that kind of help. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.
Bye-bye.